Welcome to the latest series of the FODcast, where we bring you the latest insights into the future of digital commerce. In Season 6, we continue to interview some of the most respected professionals in the industry as we broaden the topics to cover what it takes to build a business within e-commerce, navigating through business change, as well as the future of technology within digital commerce. As we continue our journey to have one of the best podcasts within commerce, we ask you to like and share within your network if you enjoy our content.
So, Michael, welcome to the FOD. Thank you very much for joining us.
Great to be here.
You are very welcome. And today I'm doing another short on the rise of fractional executive hiring, specifically within the commerce and digital transformation world. So yeah, thank you very much for coming on and looking forward to getting some of your insights. I had a few of these conversations and I was unsure at the beginning, which was maybe 3 or 4 months ago, whether the whole fractional piece was really as popular as I thought it might be. And then, of course, we've had a brief chat before this, and I've stumbled across Freeman Clark and another number of other companies. So there's a whole big wide world out there that I'm slowly getting my head around. I think from my point of view, the first question it would be good to get your feedback and knowledge on is, why do you think this fractional, desire to hire people on a fractional basis as opposed to interim or contract has come about?
I think it's a combination of things. So certainly, I've been in fractional for just over a year now, and with the previous 24 or so years being in permanent employment. And while being a permanent CTO, I think it's clear that the CTO role or the CIO role has a very specific sort of lifespan, if you like. So you wouldn't recruit a CTO or CIO for a company just starting out. That CTO is somebody who is more akin to a VP of Eng or lead engineer or somebody like that. Similarly, when you have a huge, great big global corporate, you're looking at a more structured organization with maybe many directors of technology, whatever format they take. So the role of CTO has kind of a lifespan in the maturity of an organization. And so what I've found in the organizations I've worked with, which have traditionally been what I would class as mid-market, so your 1 to 100 million or thereabouts kind of range, is they need somebody to help direct their strategy. They've moved from getting the business up and running, and they want to really start to look at how they can grow it in the best possible way. So I think fractional fits that requirement really, really well, as opposed to interim, where you have somebody for 5 days for 6 months and then they go.
Yeah.
Where fractional is different is obviously you can have somebody for 2 days on an ongoing basis, and you can flex that depending on the needs of the business. So as the business grows, that might increase, or if we're going through specific projects as well, that might increase. So I think that's, for me, the primary reason why fractional has come to be, which is the acknowledgement that mid-market businesses in particular are crying out for strategic leadership, but don't necessarily need a full-time person. I think the other aspect really to throw in that is around digital transformation in general, where you're looking at a diverse set of skills. So as you go through the various components of digital transformation, whether that is structural, whether that is organizational, a bit of technological, looking at new solutions, completely changing the way the business works or moving into new territories or products, that requires a wide array of different skills. And so the ability to bring in people with those niche skills, I think, is really valuable. So I think it's the two things combined together is why fractional over the last 24 months, 36 months, perhaps, has started getting huge prominence.
And just to go back to the point you raised about mid-market, I've heard this a number of times. I just want to understand for myself, 1 million to 100 million in revenue?
Yeah, roughly. I mean, there's it's not a hard and fast rule, but the clients that I work with, the smallest one I have is just over 1 million.
Yeah.
The largest I have is just under 100. And Freeman Clark as an organization, so as you alluded to before, we are comprised of around 100 CIOs and CTOs, mainly in the UK, but also in the US as well. And most of the clients that my colleagues work for are in that similar vein. I think 1 million is about the smallest we've got. We do have some larger organizations of a few hundred million. But again, it's really about tapping into that set of companies that need strategic leadership and guidance, but don't feel as though they need necessarily a full-time person doing that.
And at that top end of the revenue numbers, are you seeing also C-level outside of technology, operational, marketing, revenue, etc., on a fractional basis?
Yeah, so Freeman Clark is part of a wider group of fractional businesses, if you like, called Liberty Group, and so they provide exactly as you say, so fractional marketing directors, fractional sales directors, fractional CFOs, and a whole wide variety of other things alongside that. So yeah, fractional is very much alive and kicking in industries outside of technology. And again, primarily for those sort of mid-market businesses.
Yeah, it definitely seems that way. We first met when you were at Fine and Rare.
That's right.
That was some time ago, and I know that you've done a fair bit within what we broadly call digital commerce. And you talked about 24 to 36 months where you've seen that rise in demand for fractional. It kind of coincides with the similar rise in composable and headless. It'd be interesting to get your take on what you think the specific complexities are around composable and headless transformations and how that plays into the fractional demand. So there does seem to be a causal link there.
Yeah, I think I would say there is a correlation. I wouldn't say it's necessarily strong. I think there are underlying drivers behind this, but certainly in terms of the complexities of composable, decentralized, modularized, whatever you want to call it, architectures, it does require a different set of skills from technology leadership. I think the key one being we no longer talk about huge, great monolithic systems. So if you think back to 10, 15, 20 years ago, where the IT directors or the IT leaders were typically people who had a very large IT budget. They had a broad span across all aspects of technology, and they had a broad but fairly shallow capability set in terms of managing those projects. If you move forward to the modular, decentralized, composable kind of world, those sort of projects don't happen anymore. We make things out of components, a la Lego, as the analogy always goes. And what that means is you need a whole set of niche is probably too strong a word, but specialist skills in order to deliver those capabilities. So I think it's really important to make to have the right people there with the right skills at the right time, and composable architectures require a specific set of niche skills depending on whatever projects you're doing at that given time. I think the other thing that composable does is it forces you to realize that technology has to work in direct agreement and harmony with all other parts of the business. It is no longer a case of them and us. Many webinars and speeches I've given, it's about technology and the business. That dreaded phrase, technology and the business, as though technology is not part of the business. Them and us, upstairs, downstairs, Downton Abbey, you name it. We've all been there. And I think composable architectures bring right to the fore the need to engage and have technology as an equal partner alongside finance or sales or marketing or commercial or whichever team is the key stakeholder for the particular project you're working on. So that cross-functional coordination, the ability for people to have emotional intelligence and work alongside colleagues, no longer to be, as I used to be 25 years ago, the guy who sat at his keyboard coding like this. IT has to get out there and be seen and be heard. So, that cross-functional coordination is critical. I think coming back to my early days, so my very first job in IT was to develop the integration between the government gateway and the mainframe systems of the Inland Revenue. And that was the very beginning of filing your self-assessment returns on the internet. I'm told that some of my code is still running in there, which 25 years later, that's not a bad thing. But I think the important point is that I learned there was integration is hard. Whether that is cultural, human, or technological, it's really, really difficult. And I think it's all too easy, certainly in the old world, to think of, just make this system and it just magically happens. But actually, the two components that you have to get to talk to one another, the talking is the hard bit. So leaders who are aware of the complexities and difficulties of integration, so that integration awareness, I think, is really, really important. And then I think the final point that we've talked, lots of people have talked lots about, and there's plenty of books in your airport departure lounge on this, is the need to continuously improve. So the world we live in, so the saying goes, it's increasing in complexity exponentially, it's changing exponentially faster, and we need to adapt to the challenges and the changes of the environment, of our competitors, of the technology. And so it's really, really important for technology leaders not to be that old-fashioned stick in the mud, but somebody who is agile with a lowercase a, able to adapt, and willing to learn and change. So it's that continuous improvement to evolve, essentially. I think those are the key areas why I think composable drives particular role traits, if you like, these days.
What we're kind of saying is it fundamentally impacts the organizational structure. And what I believe to be happening then is therefore to get the niche skills that we talked about, to actually get the integration right and have technology on the same level as all the other functions of the business. You're seeing that demand for someone who has the previous depth of knowledge, but isn't necessarily required on that full-time basis.
Absolutely. And I think also you touched on an interesting point there, which is there is a fundamental relationship between the structure of the systems we create and the structure of the people who are creating them. And this is not new news. This was from the 1960s, and it's something I often quote, and I love it. It's as ubiquitous as Moore's law is, and it's called Conway's law. So Melville Conway, who was a programmer in the 1960s, he came up with this hypothesis, which has subsequently been shown to be absolutely true, which is that it's organizations that design systems, those systems will be constrained to reflect the structure of the people who make them, or the communications of the people who make them. So if you're building a system in a composable world made up of lots of different modules, and those modules are built by different teams, if those teams are completely siloed and never talk to each other, either they have cultural differences, or they're in different time zones, or they just don't feel part of the wider organization, then those individual components will not talk to each other. So from a technological perspective, you will get what I often refer to as throw it over the wall messages, which is, there you go, deal with that. System A, system B, there you go, sort it out. Whereas if you have a really lively, collaborative set of people working on all of these different systems, they get along, they regularly talk, they have great communication, then what you'll end up with is a system of components which communicate really well. So far more smaller messages. So that Conway's law is still as true today as it was when it was posited, in the late 60s. And I think it's really, really important to acknowledge that. And I think the other thing that I was thinking about probably about three, 4 weeks ago, back in the 1990s, there was a fairly famous book by Stephen Covey, but called the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And he looks at the traits that make people effective, and moving from kind of dependence, relying on somebody to teach you, to independence, being able to do it by yourself, to then interdependence. It's like kind of learning to ride a bike. So somebody has to teach you to ride a bike, and then you're a bit wobbly, but then you do it yourself. And then going from that to that independence to then interdependence, which is just enjoying cycling with a group of buddies. So it's that moving from dependence to independence to interdependence that is also true with these systems and these organizational structures as well. So I think there's a huge play here with psychology, with organizational change, and it's a fascinating area. And I think people need to understand that it's not just about the technology. It's about the people, stupid, like they said about the economy.
But so interdependence is the nirvana. That's the end.
Yes.
And knowing this, and knowing that a lot of businesses have these sticking points through the lack of good communication channels between the people and the technology. Does this then change the strategy for a lot of your clients, the business strategy, knowing these things and also understanding, if they're specifically within commerce, how composable and headless is impacting the actual development of the platforms?
Yeah, I mean, I work with currently 4 very different organizations, a couple of manufacturers, one in the services industry, producing reports, and another as an architecture practice. So their problems are very different, but in some ways, related. So as we were saying just before, it's about the structure of the organization and making sure people are able to adapt and change and deliver effective change quickly. The organization, in terms of commerce, if you like, so looking at headless commerce, so I've got an organization that's recently just implemented a new website. And again, the big message I had to give there was, it's not just about turning on a piece of SaaS software and configuring it and hey presto, everything's good. It's well, how do your orders get to the back end, and how do you know you've got stock of that, and how do you account for it? So all of those are integration problems again. It always comes back to the integrations.
So if we've talked about the organizational structure and the business strategy from a cultural point of view. How does the impact of a fractional hire, yes, in technology or marketing, wherever, but we can talk about technology specifically for you. How does that impact the culture? Because you're saying we've got someone here who's our point of reference for all decision making, and we presumably run the decisions through that person, but they're not responsible for owning what actually happens.
Yeah.
And so how does that dynamic play out from a culture point of view?
That's a great point, and it's important to acknowledge the fact that, as a fractional leader, while I could and am happy to be the manager for teams of people, I generally try not to, because my role is as a consultant, as a mentor, as a coach, as a strategist. So it is about, not riding the bike for people, but teaching people how to ride their bike. So from a cultural perspective, I think the big wins are just to get people on side. I'm not here to take other people's jobs. Give you one example from one of my clients. They're the smallest of the organizations that I work for. They're a really go-getter organization. They're doing some fantastic work with some really big names in terms of kind of trend analysis within various sectors. And they have a team of 23 people, almost all of whom are focused on content creation. They have literally 0 people who are in any way technologically focused. And, what happens is if they want to change from their third party, they want some new functionality on their website, somebody will phone up the third party and say, hey, can you just add this? And then somebody else will phone up and say, hey, can you add that? And all of a sudden you have a spaghetti mess of different things of, there's no central governance, there's no thought process as to, well, why are you asking for this and you're asking for something slightly different? You want the website to be green and you want the website to be blue. Let's work out what's the right answer for everybody. So being that voice of reason, very much in the client's camp, but where I can challenge and question and provide guidance to some of the things the third parties are coming back with. And again, I think there's a knowledge gap there in a lot of the clients that I see, which is they just need somebody to translate the techno-garble from the third parties that they work for to say, is this going to make us money? Is this the right decision to use? And that is predominantly where I see most of my time being. But from a cultural perspective, I think once they realize that I'm not here to take their jobs, I'm here to help them, and I very much call myself, when I'm working for a client, I say we. Small point, but that is how I feel. I am working for you. I am not some third party. I am a part of you. I am representing you. So I'm going to call it client X, client Y, whatever. So I think culturally, you embed yourself in those organizations, and it's about gaining trust, and to do that, it's just about lots of communication and sitting with people, and doing the right thing by everybody.
And that actually feeds into a query that's been raised by a number of clients when I've talked to them about fractional and would you consider someone on a fractional basis? And they often talk about, but what if something happens when they're not doing one of their days? Now, I kind of get it, because if someone's so integral to the strategy of an integration and they're doing 2 days, you as a business owner can't expect them to do substantially more, because everyone's trying to earn revenue, they are trying to earn money. But on the flip side, if something goes wrong and we need that person's guidance, we kind of need to be able to call on them. So I'd be interested to see where you stand on that.
Great question. And yes, I get that a lot as well. The important point to make is I don't have specific days for specific clients. It's not like Monday is client A and Tuesday is client B, and it just does not work like that. I mean, yes, I will predominantly spend half a day with a particular client because I've booked that out with meetings and I'm going to client site and I'm talking about their particular project or strategy or whatever. So but it doesn't preclude me from taking a call or answering an email from a different client. I suppose one example I'll give you from about 4 weeks ago. I went to one of my clients down the A1. I had a 4-hour meeting, 4 hours of meetings with them, and I was driving back, and it was a Friday. I remember, yes, it was a Friday, driving back up the A1 back home, and I get a phone call from a different client saying, help, we think we've had a cyber attack. Okay, right. So find the next lay-by to pull into. Call the relevant people in the business who can sort it out, call the third parties who are the managed service providers who can help. Have you done this? Have you checked that? Have you spoken to them? And then really all my job was kind of coordinating the communication. So coming back to what we said right at the beginning of this conversation about communication, and it was literally a case of, Anne, Bob, Charlie, you get on and do your work. I'll dial in every quarter of an hour. I will speak to the senior leadership team and keep them abreast of what's happening and keep all the key stakeholders aware of what's going on. So I become the communication conduit and the facilitator and the have you checked ... sort of person. And the guys within the organization can get on with that. But that's an example of where I had to go from one client to another very quickly to fix that problem. So there isn't a specific time or a specific day. You do right by the client, and again that isn't meant to sound kind of gut-wrenchingly awful. It is exactly the case. I will do whatever's right to maximize the happiness of all of my clients.
Yeah, and it makes sense because ultimately they'll continue to want to work with you, and one of the big important things is that those people you're working with also talk well of you to other people within the sector, and it's can be quite a close-knit space.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think that's a really good point. So within Freeman Clarke, we do very, very regular NPS, Net Promoter Score surveys with all of our clients. And also, the average tenure of a fractional principal, as we're called, with a client is in excess of 2 years these days, which, is a fairly lengthy period of time. If you think about kind of organizations getting a fractional person in, they're probably thinking, well, we just need to do this project and then they'll leave. We have many clients with principals who've been with them for 10 years.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that is a decent tenure for what is effectively meant to be a short-term gig, really.
Yeah, and obviously it varies and it depends on what the organization wants to do. So, very often we're called into, I'm taking some examples from other from other principals here, but help, we need some auditing for our cyber security, and can you help us with that? So we'll help with that, and then while we're doing that, we discover that the ERP is 5 years out of support and it's on its last legs, and it's basically held together by string and sealing wax, and so we kind of say, well, we're not saying you should replace it, but here are some options. And then they kind of go, oh yeah, good point. Actually, can you help us with that? So that then turns it. So it's not done in a sort of foot in the door kind of approach of, now we're here, we need to fix this, this, and this. It's very much done on the basis of, here are some risks. You can choose to tackle some of these. You might have mitigations already in place, in which case they're fine. But we need to look at potential options for projects moving forward. And if that means you want to use me to help lead and guide that, then that's great. And if you want to do it by yourselves, then that's also great as well. So yeah, I think happiness from a client perspective is absolutely crucial for me personally. So it took me about 3 years to define my own personal mantra. So I think it's really important that everybody should have their own personal value statement or mantra, if you like. And my own personal one is, I want to add value every day. And that sounds utterly banal and utterly facile and broad. But it does. But this is the concentration of what I do, whether it is helping A-level students with their, maths or physics education. If I see somebody kind of just understanding that one bit of, calculus or geometry or whatever it happens to be, and they just go, that's, for me, that is just so rewarding. And it's the same with clients in the CTO, CIO space, which is, if you deliver a project and they go, do you know what? didn't know we could actually deliver this, didn't think we would be able to get there, then that's value add for me. So having that mantra is really crucial for me. So yeah, it's about satisfaction and value.
Nice. And presumably being fractional now, you're getting a lot more of that because you're with 4 clients at any one point in time. So you're helping 4 times as many clients as you would normally if you were in a perm role. Or
yeah, and do you know what, the bit that's taken me a while to kind of get my head around is, when you're in a permanent role. So my previous organizations, I've been the last long one at Wexford Video, where I was there for 7 years. So replaced the website, replaced the back end, implemented a new composable ERP solution, mergers and acquisitions, joined businesses together, data cleansing activities, digital transformation, you name it. We did it all. But you're still working with the same group of people with the same way of communicating and the same cultures. And that's not a bad thing. But the big realization for me is when you're talking to other businesses, they work in different ways. They have very different processes. So it's not just the people, but it's about the communications and the culture. So having to dial your head into, okay, so these people don't mind me being a little bit jokey and funny, whereas these people absolutely, you have to be very serious with them, or however it so is. So getting your head around those cultural differences, I think, was an interesting challenge for me into the fractional business.
yeah, I can imagine. So last question then for me is, how old is Freeman Clark, by the way, as a business, before I go into the last question?
It's about 12 years old, I think, something like that.
Okay, so it's been delivering.
It's been around a while. Yeah.
Okay. The question I have is, what's the future for fractional, and is this, in your view, a temporary thing? Is this a temporary thing, or are we going to see this as just forming part of the future of commerce, digital transformation, etc.?
I would say it's here to stay. And I'd say that because, we in business, there is always going to be a driver to do more. There's always going to be ever increasing threats from technological change, from competitive change, or whatever. So organizations need to be more agile. So they will need to work on more things simultaneously. Those things are going to be more modular, so they can get more reuse out of them. So I think composable is certainly, however we so call it. I'm deliberately, I'm not avoiding the use of composable and headless, but I'm saying this is part of a bigger picture, which is the modularization of architectures, the decentralization of architectures, I think is a wider point. And I think with that happening, fractional will very much be here to stay because of the need to have the right skill sets at the right time and deliver for particularly mid-market organizations. I think the danger we have, and again, we've seen this, well, when you're as old as me, you've seen it in IT so many times where, organizations go from, strong structured hierarchy to matrix decentralized organizations, back to hierarchy, back to matrix. So we go on these loops of culture and structure. And I think the same is true, as we were saying about Conway's law, for technology as well. So we've gone from monolithic systems. Remember when we started talking about enterprise Java beans in the mid 1990s, and that was going to change the world because it was going to make everything modular. And then we built enterprise Java beans and they got bigger and bigger and bigger, and they eventually became monoliths themselves. And then we said, no, but we need services in the early 2000s. We need all of those good things about services, and we created services and started decentralizing again, and then those services became bigger and bigger and bigger, and we said, no, we need microservices now. So we've gone on this ever kind of iterative loop of monolithic to decentralized to monolithic. So I think the only caveat and the only danger I would say in my answer before is that, these composable headless things are in danger of becoming bigger than, they ought to serve. So they're thereby becoming monoliths themselves, and back around the loop we go. But is fractional here to stay? Absolutely. I think, the nature of work in general, working from home, more flexibility, more freedom, the rise of the mid-market organizations and the need for some strategy, but not full-time strategy, the need for specific niches and skill sets. I think all of those things work together to basically convince me that fractional is here to stay.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the insights. It's been a great, well, we were going to aim for half an hour, but 40 minutes. But no, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And it's been really good.
Fantastic, Tim. Great to speak to you.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks very much. Take care. Bye-bye.